Hey there, Mike Thompson from the High Performance Center in Montreal, speaking with a good friend of mine, Judy Riege. Judy, we met several years ago, 2 years ago, I guess, not several, through On the Podium's Canada Coach Program, and we've been working together ever since. Judy's an expert through leadership, connection, and she's also a teacher, running her own business, working with schools and corporations, and now getting into sport. How are you, Judy, first of all?
I'm good, doing great.
Did I introduce you the right way?
That's great. Thank you.
Perfect. Um, so Judy's been a bit of a mentor for me for the last few years. One of the things that we've worked a lot on is emotional intelligence and understanding how to manage your surroundings. So manage people that are working for you, people that work with you, and people that work above you. And so we had a little conversation the other day through text, basically around, I was watching the news. I was watching Donald Trump double down on insisting he's been right all along about certain things. And, it reminded me of different personality types. And the one thing that flashed into my brain is, I don't think I can manage this person. I don't think I could ever influence this person in any way. And I'm sure that coaches have had experiences where they've had other parents, board members, or athletes that are just dug into their position and can't possibly change their minds. And I'm just wondering, what do you do with someone like that, Judy? Just to help other coaches who might be in the same position or might have the same thoughts. How do you influence somebody who's doubled down and entrenched in their position?
Okay, well, let's unpack this a couple different ways. One of the first things I know to be true is if you're not willing to learn, you won't. So one of the things that I learned in working with people is sometimes the question of, are you willing to hear a different side to this story? So the curiosity to actually be around understanding it better allows us to determine, is this person even willing? And if the answer is no, then there's not an awful lot I can do. I get to choose then how I want to engage in that relationship going forward. But the other side, a lot of times when people are what we perceive as doubled down and entrenched, and I'm going to actually completely remove the Donald Trump reference and sort of say, let's talk about people that we interact with, like you say, parents, board members, colleagues, other coaches, leaders we work for or with. A lot of times when people present what's going on for them, they're presenting their position. But behind every position are people's interests. And when you kind of unpack what interests are, it's their thoughts about a situation, their experience about it, their feelings about it, their beliefs about the world. And so a lot of times we get into conversations with people where it's my position versus your position. And I think my experience has been when we get curious around what's behind that position, how did they come to that conclusion? Why are they thinking that way? And when we spend more time listening and asking questions to understand, which is really kind of that practice of empathy, what happens is people start to tell us more. And the more data that I surface, the more information I have, the more I'm able to respond versus wait for my turn to talk and react to whether I agree or disagree with what you're saying.
So I think the difficult part of those kind of conversations is that they're usually fairly emotionally driven. So the person holding that position, let's talk about a parent or a board member or a coach, has that position because they're emotionally involved in a situation, which becomes a very, very muddy water to negotiate because it's not necessarily logic. It's emotion that's driving the conversation. It's emotion that's driving the feeling. So how do we manage that? How do we then go to a person to try to change their mind or try to influence their decision making if what they're seeing is mostly emotion as opposed to logic?
So I'm going to oversimplify something. In some respects, it's quite complicated. So the more emotion I have when I can name it, or I can name it for you, if you were the one emoting at me and I were to say, oh, Mike, this is really frustrating for you, and I gave you space to keep going, yes, it is, and keep talking. Emotion is energy in motion. And when I let you have all your emotion get it out, and then you almost breathe, there is a space and place that if I'm able to hold my calm as much as I can and allow you to emote. And then when you've sort of put it all out there and I really listen to you and be able to then say, okay, look, can I make sure I heard you? And almost replay back to people kind of the sound bites of the big messages you were able to capture, and then say, did I get it right? What that starts to do is we start to actually engage a different part of somebody's brain. Like when I'm emoting to you, the part of my brain that actually solves problem, makes choices, thinks things through logically isn't online. And as the receiver in that space, if I give you a space, as long as it's not kind of being disrespectful or hurtful, I mean, I get to draw those boundaries. You can't call me names, you can't whatever, but I can say, okay, this is big.
So I remember you describing this to me in my group a while ago as the emotional brain or the reptile brain when you receive things, and you use that model of what your brain looks like.
This one.
Can you maybe go through that with people? Just it's a really good
Okay.
illustration of what you're
So this is an oversimplification, and Dan Siegel, who's a neuroscientist and a psychiatrist whose work around awareness is amazing. So this is one way he teaches parents around how do we help manage things with kids. And I think it works with adults too. So there's fundamentally kind of, I'm going to simplify it as there's my downstairs brain and my upstairs brain. And so if this is sort of my brain in my head, the part that kind of represents my palm and my thumb represents sort of two parts of my brain. The part that deals with my survival, some might call it the reptilian brain, although there's a group that says it's getting oversimplified, but it manages all those things I don't have to think about: heart rate, breathing, all that stuff. That when I get fired up emotionally, that's the system that kicks in for my freeze, flight, or fight mode. My thumb represents what's called our amygdala, which is really the emotional center of our brain. It houses our memories, our emotions, and our habits. Now, when I'm in a big, like irritated, frustrated, annoyed, mad, upset, sad, disappointed, ashamed, whatever my stuff is going on, what happens is this part of my downstairs brain gets fired up, and it basically takes the part of my brain called the neocortex that sits here behind my forehead offline. So in other words, the simplified version is when people are flipping their lids, right? In other words, freaking out at us, my job as the receiver is, first of all, to make sure that I can put my own lid back on, which is part of like breathing and actually asking questions, because then, or getting you to keep talking, because eventually you'll kind of let the energy out and you can start to put the lid back on. So nothing happens in a highly emotional conversation when both of us have our lids off. There's no good thinking happening.
So
And
it's
that's where that position to position, like here's where I'm at, is coming at. But if I'm able to put my own, this is where self-awareness happens. If I'm able to go, whoa, Mike, like this, you're pissed off. Tell me more about that. Like, I'm surprised or I'm shocked or whatever I might say to you. Tell me more. And you keep talking. The energy behind your emotion hopefully starts to dissipate. And then when it feels like there's enough out there and I'm able to say to you, hey, can I just make sure I heard what you were sending my way? Then what happens is, and I start to ask you questions to make sure I understand, I'm actually helping you put your lid on and calm down. And then we're both in this place where now I'm getting curious around. So let me make sure I understand. Here's what you're thinking. Here's how you feel about it. This is what you believe or want is the ideal solution. So I always sort of coach my leaders and coaches, if you can even just get really good at asking, okay, tell me more. And what else? Like those are the things that keep people talking, because the more you surface information, the more I have to be able to really get clear on what is he or she thinking, is he or she feeling, and what do they need or want right now.
It's good stuff. And so if we're gonna, so I just want to keep this to a watchable length so people
Yeah,
don't.
totally.
If we can give coaches that are watching this, like maybe 3 tips, 3 things to think about if they know they're about to head into a difficult conversation with somebody who they automatically are not going to agree with. This is going to be a really tough conversation. 3 tips we can give someone in advance going into those kind of conversations. 3 things they can think about beforehand.
Okay. First thing, don't forget to breathe. Right? Second thing is go in with a curious mindset. If you go in with the mindset to learn, not to be right, then you're going to figure things out. And the other thing I always say to people is go in almost with a cheat sheet or a sticky note with 3 questions that you need to be able to ask them, like, to help surface their stuff. So a couple key questions that I always say to people is, don't start a question with why. Go in with questions like, when did this start? What else is going on? If this was, what is your ideal outcome for this thing? What are some things you hope I learn from this conversation? So when we come in with 2 or 3 questions that at least demonstrate I'm trying to pull information out of you, I'm building trust. I'm actually causing the person who's emoting or fired up about their position to hopefully share with me more about what's behind that position. So breathe, go in there with a sense of curiosity versus need to be right, and go in armed with 3 or 4 questions that start with what, when, how, or where. And if you can then, sort of pull that out, I go back to, here's what I come back to. The magic formula for me with leaders is find out what they want, like in terms of managing up, out, and across, or even yourself. Find out what they want, go get it, and give it to them. And
Brilliant.
so if I'm asking you questions, I'm finding out what you want. I may not be able to give it to you, but I may be able to refer you to someone who knows more than me or who has the authority to make that decision. Or if I'm in no position in my program or whatever to do anything, then I get to say, I can't do that. And here's why.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant stuff. I really do appreciate it. This is why I work with this lady, by the way. She's fantastic and extremely smart. Canada's answer to Brene Brown, Judy
Oh,
Riege.
thank you.
I really appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully this has been helpful to some coaches who have tough answers and tough conversations sometime in the future when things get back to normal. Thank you
Yes.
very much, Judy.
Thanks, Mike. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.